Put the cat in the closet and pull out your puppets. We're talking with Pam Arciero on Meet Our Mentor. Hello. Is it Pam or is it Pam? I don't remember which.
Pam.
Pam. Hello, Pam. It's so good to see you here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Meet Our Mentors, the Puppeteers of America program, where we get to talk with puppeteers like Pam, and we get to talk a little bit about the mentors that help them along the way. I'm really happy I have a very first memory of the first time I met you. I can imagine that you do not remember it at all, but we were in Humboldt at the university there. Muppets were doing a 2-week Muppets Do Puppets, where we did rod puppets, Boonraku puppets, shadow puppets, moving mouth puppets. And you were there for the moving mouth puppet portion. And we were singing some Sesame Street song along with like the tape of Sesame Street, and the glee on your face when you had a puppet and you were watching the monitor and you were singing along with these songs. I will never forget how thrilled you were. And I was thinking, my goodness, this woman's been doing this forever, and she's so pleased to have a puppet on her hand singing along with this silly Sesame Street song. That is so cool. I really appreciated that.
Well, thank you. I have to say, they're probably my happiest moments are always looking in the camera with that puppet. I mean, I love live performances too. That's a whole different thing. But you know, when you do that style of puppetry and you're watching yourself, it's a whole different. It's just fun. It's just always the best for me. So,
were you always doing theater, or did you find puppetry and that was performance for you, or where did it start?
I started actually my undergraduate degrees in dance, and I was a dancer. And then my mentor, Kermit Love, came to teach at the University of Hawaii. And I ran into some friends, met some lovely, wonderful women in my dance class who said, "Oh yeah, we're taking this puppet class. Do you want to join us?" And I was said, sure, because I like to sing, I like to dance, I like to act. And I was doing a little bit of all that, but mostly working on my dance degree. And this man, this lovely Kermit Love, came to teach at the University of Hawaii for the summer session. And he's controversial for a lot of people. There are a lot of people he really made very angry. But for me, he loved art and he loved puppetry. So the combination of the puppetry and art and costumes and parade forms and Big Bird and all that. And he was a man, of course, who he didn't design Big Bird, but he did build all of the Big Birds, and he designed the Snuffleupagus and brought him forward, and other big puppets as well. He was such an inspiration, and he was so lovely to encourage us to think about puppetry not as wiggling dollies, but literally as an art form. And that was the first time my eyes sort of opened up to like, wait, what? This is really, you can make beautiful things, you can move them, you can sing with them, you can dance with them. It was like, I found it. Yay.
And
Yeah.
this was all at University of Hawaii when he came and he did the okay, gotcha. And so they have a puppetry program at that time too, or was that
They had a couple of courses. They had a very strong children's theater department that was being run by Tamara Hunt, and Tammy Hunt was very, very much a puppeteer's pro puppeteer. I mean, she was pro theater for youth. That was her PhD and all of that. The high academic standings were for that, but she loved puppets, and so she'd always teach a puppet course during the year, and then would bring puppeteers in to teach the summer sessions, specialty ones like Kermit. Right, you bring them in from New York. And the nice thing about being in Hawaii, and this is many benefits for me, is that everybody wants to come to Hawaii. You ask them to come teach. Sure, why
okay?
wouldn't I want to go to Hawaii to teach? So it really was a benefit. And I have a delightful little twist on that, which was 30 years later, I was asked to teach that same course, that first puppetry course that I took at the University of Hawaii. And I taught that for about 7 years. Every summer I teach for 3 weeks. And it was a full circle, really complete and really fun to be sort of doing what Kermit had done for me, hopefully doing that for other people.
That's fantastic. So would you be able to pull people from the program there and then get them interested in the O'Neill to have them come there to sort of continue?
Absolutely. I
Nice,
had
nice.
many, many students who were started at UH, ended up at O'Neill for a number of summers with me. It was really fun to see them progress and move forward that way.
That
And lots of times they were beginning puppeteers too. So it was not what the University of Hawaii did that's very smart. And if you're connected to university, is at that time, this changed, which is also why I'm not teaching there now. But at that time, one of the requirements for education majors, teachers, was that one of your arts classes could be puppetry.
Which makes so much sense for teachers to the university here in Sacramento was doing the same thing where it was like, oh yeah, let's have and they have a huge liberal studies program, which is elementary school teachers essentially, and they
Mhm.
would have all the teachers could take that as their theater arts requirement, and
Right.
that class was always full, and then they dropped that, and I just thought that was the worst thing in the world.
Well, that's what they did at the University of Hawaii. There were always 20 and 30 students, in a class who just wanted to take the class, and they were beginning. And so that summer session that I taught was always full. And then they dropped that as an option. So you could still take puppetry, but it was not going to fulfill any,
That's
requirement.
what a way to kill a class is just
And
to
so
take it away. I mean, that is why I'm a puppeteer, is I took that course because I was in school to become a teacher, took that course, changed the trajectory of my life. As this is
wow.
amazing. This is incredible. I'm
Who
so glad
taught
it was
that?
a
Was that
requirement.
was that who taught that
It was a
class?
guy named Richard Bay.
Oh yes,
He's
of course we know Richard Bay.
Yeah, Richard it came out to Hawaii a few times when a couple of Boon Raccoon masters came out during their summer session,
Yeah.
and he took courses out there in Hawaii as well. It was just yeah, it was brilliant. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is really cool. I'm really sad to hear that Hawaii dropped it as a requirement. That's too bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that people aren't interested. It's just that if you know that you need to take this art course, why would you take one more class that you don't necessarily have to take? I mean, I understand how that is.
Yeah.
Um, so so from that point on, anyway, so University of Hawaii was where I started, and that I went from there to UConn to get my graduate degree.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And was Bart teaching at UConn at the time, or was that
no, that was Frank Ballard at the
Frank
time.
Ballard?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
and the great thing about Frank was that he brought in really amazing people like Albert Grosser and, you know, just a whole array of puppeteers would come through and teach a few weeks, and that was quite fun. We just really had a wonderful time. But one of the things about Kermit Love in Hawaii was that he got Carol Spinney to come, and Big Bird did concerts um, at the Shell in Honolulu. He'd do these symphonies that he used to go around and do. And so Carol and his wife Debbie, who is a delight, and Debbie has was with him always. He said, Muppets really needs women who work, well, why don't you come? You should come to New York and try out sometime. If you're in the New York area, come and see me. Come, go talk to Jim. And I was like, oh God, I'm some backwater kid in Honolulu. Who's going to talk to me, a silly little Hawaiian girl? What's that about? And then when I finally did get into University of Connecticut, which I was surprised I did, but after I graduated from University of Hawaii, sure enough, Carol and Debbie took me under their wing, and they, Kermit as well. They brought me to the studio. I went and watched Sesame Street every day for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months.
What was it like being at the studio for the very first time? I mean, what were you there to audition, or were you there just to observe?
I was just there to observe. It was so exciting. And of course, it's something you've seen. And again, I feel like I'm this backwater kid from Honolulu. It's like walking onto the Sesame Street set and eyeballs bulging out of your head. And I wasn't used to New Yorkers and the way New Yorkers act. So I was, again, a little Hawaiian girl. I was like, I thought I was doing something wrong all the time because people were so gruff. I couldn't figure out.
A little less mahalo than. Yeah.
And there was one cameraman, Frankie Biondo, who's well known. If you know Sesame Street, everybody knows Frankie. He shot the show for 50 years, I think.
Is a guy that will never laugh, right? That's the guy that if you get him to laugh, you've done something amazing.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And he'd just say things like, that performance was really average. And he just die. I wept. And we do the next shot, please. And you go, okay, Frankie, thanks. He said, I got a drug for you. It's called Triactin. He just had a million things like that.
Nice.
But he was very gruff, and he scared the hell out of me. It took me a long time to get used to that. But when I started, nobody had their own cameras. Nobody had the ability to rehearse by yourself. You had to do it in studio. And what would often happen was the best way to learn, it still is, frankly, is you watch what happens in the studio. You watch every detail. You watch who's the prop person? What are they doing with the props? Who's dressing the puppets? Who's the wranglers, as we fondly call them, who are taking care of the puppets? Where are the scripts coming from? How are the scripts? There's just so much to learn on a set that just watching all of the activities was the best education I could have gotten.
And how long, so Carol got you in, and would you just go and visit every time they were shooting, or how long did it take you to finally get a puppet on your hand and get in there and do something?
It was a couple of years. We used to shoot 110 shows a year. So we would start in September and go through February. And it was a long time. So whenever I had a break from school, I would call up and see if they were working, and I would get to go observe. I had met Jim Henson at that point. I'd already met him at festivals before that. But it took a couple of years. I auditioned originally with Marty Robinson, and I auditioned together. And he swears, he lovingly says that he got snuffy because we improv together so well. But he was a good puppeteer then, as he is now, wonderful puppeteer. But so I auditioned then, and they said things to me like, yeah, we'll call you. We aren't looking for women. There were no women on the show, but they weren't looking for women.
Well, clearly that's why they're not looking for them.
Well, Fran, I think, made an appearance every now and then, Fran Brill, but pretty much there was no regular woman performer on the show. But then the next year, Brian Meal was leading, and he did like 9 characters, including Grangetta.
Yeah.
So they were looking for Grangetta. And so they basically called me into audition again. We started with about 300 puppeteers. And again, in those days, no cell phone. You don't know who's calling. And what they often do is with the first audition was 300 of us. They throw the camera up there. They're teaching you technique. They have to teach you before they could audition you because nobody knew how to do this.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of more of a workshop, but they started with 300 and we went once a week for 3 months.
Oh, you're kidding me.
2 of us.
Wow.
So you would wait to see if you got the phone call. because you'd leave at the end of the night. You wouldn't know whether you're coming back the next week.
And how long would it take for the phone call to come in? Like,
So this was Thursday, and usually they called you on a Monday and said,
yeah.
come back on the Thursday.
Oh boy.
So it was like the weekend. You just go, well, I don't know. Felt good. Maybe not.
And how many people are they cutting in each round of these? I mean, like by the time you're
cutting a fair amount, like 20 people at a time.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to get down to the two that they needed. It ended up with myself and Camille Bernara, who eventually was hired like a couple of years later as well. But I got Grangetta at that point.
Yeah. Nice.
Brian had only done her for a year, so she wasn't real well established. So
did you have to look at what he had done with her in order to, and how was that? And then how long did it take for you to begin to put your imprint on that particular character?
Because she wasn't so highly developed, it wasn't too long. I pretty much picked her up, and I could follow what Brian had done. He was just doing, a grouch, and she is a grouch, so there's a certain template already
right
out there. Not too much of a stretch, but
the depth and the complexity of grouchiness, though.
Yes, well, it actually is, because their motivation, they're grouchy. Like some people are just grouchy, but their hearts are usually pretty good.
Yeah, like the camera guy.
Like my camera guy. That's right. And Carol, look at that one. Carol used to say that Oscar was based on a cab driver, literally, that picked him up on his way to the studio when he was going to audition for Oscar. And it's that same kind of thing, right? He was just a mean guy picking him up and yelling at people out of the cab. And that's how, Carol developed Oscar. And our relationship was so fun because we were really good friends. And then we got to be really good grouches together. And, same is true with Eric. We have a good time when I get to play with Eric. But I'll never forget my favorite Carol line that he ever said as Oscar to me. He says, well, you know what they say. If you don't want to be a murderer, you shouldn't hang out with people who should be killed. This looks like, that is so true.
Well, a little dark for Sesame Street, maybe, but still not make it any less.
On Sesame Street.
Oh, okay.
Over lunch. The waiter wasn't treating him well, so And with Carol, you never knew if you were.
Are you going to get Big Bird, or are you going to get Oscar the Grouch?
Right. It was a bad day. You'd be getting Oscar at lunch. It's okay, you'd be getting Big Bird. You just kind of never know.
So you must have been using all sorts of different kinds of puppetry when you were when you were doing UConn and when you were at University of Hawaii. And television puppetry is very limiting. I mean, especially for a dancer, I would imagine that, how did your experience as a dancer and using your entire body, how did you go from that to just using your right arm and your left arm?
Yes. Well, I think that I think all puppeteers have to be good observers of movement, because you are taking the full human movement, the full body movement, and you're shrinking it down to whatever size your puppet is, and you have to pay attention. And I think that's where movement really paid off for me, was that I understood how to break down a movement and how to put that in my arm, to do whatever it is with just this much, and get the feeling and the meaning that I want out of the movement. And but I always danced anyway.
Yeah, you're doing a whole show down below, right? Like, yeah.
Yes, it was embarrassing. Yeah. But I continued to dance. I still do. I love dancing still. But I think movement is so key to anything you do in puppetry, that knowing movement well and loving movement just really helps your puppet be alive. So
did you find that television puppetry was easier because you could observe your performance on the screen as you're actually doing it, whereas live puppetry, you're behind the puppet, maybe you're seeing the back of it, maybe not, but you can't actually see everything that it's doing? Was that easier for you as an observer of this kind of thing? Or
I think that I do think that being able to see myself perform was huge. And that was part of what I loved, was being able to correct constantly. When you do live puppets, Usually you're looking at the underside of the puppet or the back of the puppet, and you're not really sure 100% where that focus is. And, that's so vital to what we do, knowing exactly where that puppet is looking. In live shows, you don't, if you're a little bit off, just another person in the audience thinks you're looking at them instead of the person next to them. But with television, they know it's off. And you work with the director. You come on television in a television shot. You are a director. You're helping compose the scene constantly. You're helping to make sure that your puppet is in just the right spot so that it doesn't block the person who's really speaking, or the person who's has to have central focus. You want to make sure that you're not stealing focus. Although Jim Henson did say many times, you're not doing a good job if you're not stealing the show. um, there's a and so both Jim being another mentor, of course, Jim and Jane Henson were very kind to me always and very generous. But Jim, one time we were doing, I think it was 30 years of the Muppets or something like that in Toronto. And the director said, because there was one puppet in the back jumping up and down and just stealing the whole show. And he says, "Who's doing that?" And Jim Henson stands up and so nobody said a word. Yep, that's Jim. He's stealing his show. He can steal it.
Yep. How often did you get to work with him? What year did you start on Sesame Street?
I started, it was 1983. Actually, 82 was the first time I did some work on, but 83 was my contract. And he was there actually quite a bit those first couple of years. But he was already by then had the Muppet Show going in London. He was bouncing back and forth. He'd come in, we worked 4, 5, 6 months a year, and he'd come in every month for a few days each month. Sometimes he'd come in for a week. We did what we called Muppet inserts in those days, and it would just be Muppets, not any of the humans or anybody else. And we do the Ernie and Bert bits or Kermit on the wall. If you've seen the wall, we do Elmo and Telly on the wall. All those things were called inserts, and we just spend a week or 2 weeks, and then Frank Oz would come in, and of course Jerry and Richard and Jim and myself, Marty, David Rudman came in after a while with that too. And it'd be so fun because it was just us fooling around doing puppets along a wall most of the time. And they were so brilliant. They were watching Jim and Frank work was one of the most amazingly fun things. And then Richard and Jerry, those two, there were two great, there were 4 of them, 2 couples that were just fantastic working together. Biff and Sully was Richard and Jerry. And then you had Ernie and Bert, of course, which was Frank and Jim. And they just played each other beautifully. It was such a joy to watch.
And Jerry had such an amazing ability to sort of bounce around between, like when he's I forget the character's name in the restaurant with Grover. I mean, that
Mr. Johnson.
Those two together are the most unsung duo in Sesame Street history, I think, because Grover is brilliant and he's brilliant, but it's their relationship that is everything in that partnership. I just love that.
Right. And that's, Jerry was masterful at figuring out characters pretty quickly and making them so believable and strong. And Richard was too. Richard didn't, have as long a time as Jerry did to do that. But I remember, Jerry would he'd observe something and then he'd bring it into the studio and said, "I'm adding this to Mr. Johnson today." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." He says, "Yeah, I saw a waiter in a restaurant doing this to this poor guy, and I thought this would help Mr. Johnson." He was just constantly.
And was it movement or was it like character stuff or like all of the above?
Movement. Jerry was a lot about the vocal qualities and the acting chops. Jerry was the actor of us. He was really a wonderful, wonderful actor. And of course, his vocal, he could, whatever he did vocally was just fantastic. He could create such interesting things. There, Grover and Mr. Johnson.
Brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Richard Hunt and what it was like? I know you include him as one of your mentors as well. Can you talk a little bit about Richard?
Absolutely. Richard was amazingly funny and quick-witted, and he didn't tolerate fools very well. He didn't suffer fools in any way, shape, or form. So if he didn't like you, he told you right away. You kind of knew right away that you weren't going to be in Richard's team.
Mm.
And I was very lucky because Richard really liked me, and we got along just wonderfully. And he would help me. He'd whisper things to me between takes. He'd say, "Just look at it," and he wouldn't say, "You did that crap." He'd say, he said, next take, just look at the, because we would watch playback. We don't do that so much anymore, but you'd watch it play back right away so you could see the mistakes that you made or what you wanted to improve. And so he just really subtly say to me, next time, watch on the playback, see where your focus is, see that you need to be here. And he would advise me too, in a lot of ways, on sort of dealing with, because it is sort of, it's super overwhelming to be with all these huge personalities and these famous people that you've loved from afar for so long.
And such an insular group too, that have been working with each other to come in from the outside. I can't imagine.
It was very challenging. That Marty and I sort of broke into that a little bit. Anyway.
Is that why you guys bonded so much? Because you had that common sort of, yeah.
We both came in about the same time, and yeah, we were both sort of fitting our way in. And then David came in a short time after that as well. And then Carmen came in a few more years after that. So it was a slowly easing people in. But again, it was just so, you couldn't believe that you were in the room with these people. And there were things, Richard was just, he was funny. He loved to sing. He was always, doing these big Broadway show numbers back in the dressing room. And he did have one funny habit, which was he would wait for them to call action before he'd stop reading the New York Times. So we'd be rehearsing, he'd read a few lines, and then he'd go back to reading the Times. And then they'd say action, and he'd put the paper down, and then he'd start. I was like, you're going to miss the cue. Oh, God, I could never do it. So he was just totally calm, collected, and, he was just having a good time doing that. Richard, I think puppetry was kind of second nature to him. I think his first love was acting, but he really did a great job with all the puppets. He loved being silly and bizarre and off the wall, and that's what puppetry affords you, right?
Yeah.
You can get away with much broader characters, much more ridiculous things going on. So
was there a sense when they would be going back and forth between London doing the Muppet Show and then coming back to Sesame Street? Was there like a sense of like returning to home, or was there, or now we've got to sort of check this box, or what was that like going back and forth for them?
And actually the Muppet Show was more or less done by the time I started, but it was Fraggle Rock was being shot in Toronto. And so we were left, we were sort of the standby crew left at Sesame, and then everybody would go to Toronto for 4 days. And then Richard and Jerry were bouncing back and forth. Frank and Jim stayed in Toronto most of the time. And so it was interesting because we were really holding down the fort. There's my guy. And Richard would come in and just, it wasn't a change. They knew the characters inside and out. Once they walked on a set, they knew who they were doing. One of my favorite Richard Hunt stories was we were on a plane flying back from doing Fraggle Rock or something from Toronto to New York, and the really bad turbulence, really bad. And he grabbed my hand across the aisle. He says, "Well, look at it this way, honey. If this goes down, at least we'll get a mention in the New York Times because there's 2 of us."
They calm you right down, right?
He got his own mention in the New York Times. But it was a great thing, and he was a most generous, giving person. He really was.
I'm so glad you got to that he liked you, and
Yeah,
that
me
he
too.
was whispering in your ear to try to make you a better puppeteer. I think that's incredible. What a
Yeah.
beautiful gift to be able to give to someone. I mean, essentially that's what you're doing at the O'Neill, isn't it? I mean, you are providing a space for people to go and I mean, there is, as a creating puppeteer, you work in a vacuum so often, and so to get to go and to when I got to be there a few years ago, Bart pulled me aside and said, "I have a bunch of notes for you. This is what I do. It's always what I've done. I've got a bunch of notes for you." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is the best. Give me the notes. Like, let me see what you're seeing, because you get so isolated, and the O'Neill is such a great place to go." Can you talk to me about how you slid into the O'Neill?
Well, George Latshaw, who I'd met at many, many festivals over the years, and he was another person who was just so inspiring in the fact that he loved puppetry so much, and he loved what was going on with it. And there he is.
Look at
He
that
was
guy.
just he was just the best, and so kind and so committed and devoted to the art form. It was amazing. So I was at the O'Neill. I was myself, Marty Robinson, and Kathy Mullen were the first guest artists performance wise, and we were invited by Jane Henson and George Latshaw to come, and this was about a year after Jim had died, so it was kind of in honor of Jim, more or less, is why it started. And so we were invited to do that, and Richard Termini was at that point the artistic director. And so I came, and my son was a year and a half old, so I was bouncing between trying to get this this thing done in Connecticut,
Oh
running
my
around.
goodness.
But it was so fun and so wonderful. And then the next year I came back just kind of in an advisory mode. I just showed up I kept showing up, basically. They couldn't get rid of me. Um, they brought other guest artists in. And then I guess about 5 years in, Richard asked me that he wanted to. Richard then actually George Latshaw was the original artistic director of the O'Neill, and then Richard became artistic director the next year. George didn't want I think the humbug, because it is kind of humbuggy.
Mm,
It's a lot of
mm,
work.
yeah.
But George handed it to Richard, and then Richard, a few years after that, asked me if I would do the emerging artists, because they wanted to do a second tier, not just the puppeteers coming in and studying with an artist, but a second level of a stronger commitment to that individual artist. So I ran the emerging artists program for about 12 years, I think, 10 or 12 years. And then Richard Richard felt that he wanted to move on from the artistic director. He didn't want to leave. He was moving so much into photography, and it was taking more and more of his time. So he didn't quite have the time commitment, and asked if I would come, and he and Bart and Jane Henson sat me down and said, "We think we want you to be the artistic director." I said, "You're kidding. No, I can't do that." And they said, "No, we think you can." And
How
so
long have you been doing that now?
I started in 2012 as artistic director. So what is
So
that?
this will be year 12 then, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that right?
2024.
Yeah.
Summer 2024. That's
No,
yeah.
it's longer than that. I'm wrong. It's 2002.
To that
It's 2002.
22. But it feels like 12 years. It just feels
Oh, sorry, it was 2002. Yes.
yeah.
Richard had been artistic director for 12 years when I took it over. That's why the 12
Gotcha.
is sticking in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're up to 33. So that's why all of a sudden the math wasn't working. This is the 33rd year. So yeah, I've been doing it for, I think, a little over 21 years.
And what do you take from it? I mean, it's clear to anyone who's ever been there and been a part of it that it is just the most incredible chance to get to go and create and be with other creatives and work, and time slows down, and it's an incredible experience that you and the staff provide for people that attend. What do you take from it?
Headaches. No,
Lots of Advil. I take
that's
lots of
Advil and a lot of wine. No, I love nurturing puppeteers, and I feel like I'm paying it forward and paying it back. I'm paying it forward in that I hope all the puppeteers who come through will be able to do that for other puppeteers, because we're a small, woolly, noble bunch, and there aren't that many people who appreciate how difficult it is, what we try to do in so many levels, on so many levels, television or not. It is a challenging thing to do. And when we do it right, it's just so incredibly beautiful and so incredibly charming that my joy that I take from there is that there are people who are going to continue to do this. And I see people grow and change and become amazing things. And if I can help you that little bit, that little step up to get to someplace else, that's what makes me happy. That is truly my gift that I take away, is that I touch people in a way that I know they're going to be able to go out and touch them. It's my way of helping the rest of the world, really, to move it forward, to pay it forward, to keep this art form alive,
Mm.
and keep, you know, enable people to tell their stories in our unique, strange way that we do.
It's just lovely. That's what when I met George Latshaw at my first O'Neill, that's exactly, I was like, who is this old guy? And he would be down in the shop building something, not for anything, just for the pure joy of building it, and it was infectious, his passion for it, and I shared it, and it was really neat how much he would sort of pull you aside and share and just give, and that was the entire experience. So thanks so much for continuing that on. That's just, it's a big deal. And it is, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about your directing as well, but before the program, we were talking a little bit about Lisa Simon. Can you tell me a little bit about her as a mentor, and as you know, the difference for you directing and performing?
Yeah. So Lisa Simon was an incredible producer and director on Sesame Street for many, many years. She was eventually became executive producer for a while. Um, and she was fantastic. She started out basically hurting the kid actors and worked her way up
Wow.
and learned her craft from the get-go. She was such an inspiration in terms of being a strong woman, a strong leader, and she really, so many ideas about directing. She was so good at getting the job done without making you feel terrible, which some directors were very good at, making you feel pretty horrible about not getting the job done. But she was not that, and she had such a good eye. And she had a lot of heart and a lot of soul, and she shared that with us all, and particularly with me, and encouraged me in terms of, yes, you should pursue directing. That's a good idea. Um, you know, from the way I looked at things, she liked what I looked at. Lisa, we went on several tours. She arranged and she'd do some incredible outreach. But the one that I remember most is that she was instrumental in setting up tours after Katrina. We went
Mm.
down 3 weeks. 3 weeks, that's the Katrina shot there. Yeah, and that's her on the set. 3 weeks after the Katrina had decimated the South, we went down and did shows for the kids in the schools.
Was there even any infrastructure at that time for you to guys
Not
go
much.
in?
The first one was very rough. We were mostly on a
Wow.
bus, and then we'd just go into, like, whatever school was standing in classroom. We went 3 trips. The second one was 6 weeks, and that was more effective because they had sort of started getting back into normal life. And the teachers would come afterwards crying and saying to us, "Thank you so much for coming. We haven't seen these children smile in 6 weeks."
Oh,
So it
wow.
was just really
Wow.
moving, and that was her. That was her all over, pushing for us to keep doing that, finding the funding, finding the money, getting the other producers to kick in so we could go and do that and reach those kids in the South. It was amazing, and that's who she was. She was just that person. She was so sweet. But that's her on the Katrina tour with all the kids crawling in her lap. It was
Look at
really,
that. That's amazing.
yeah,
How cool.
yeah.
So were there other people that can we? I just want to talk a little bit about Annika's elephants. I got
Oh,
to see it at the festival in Washington D.C. And in Maryland. It was really lovely. It was really lovely. And the who's the actor that played the lead role? She was
Ja- Jamaica Collins, and she's a wonderful puppeteer. We're just lucky that she's a spectacular actress as
oh
well.
my gosh, she was magnetic, and she believed in every single character that she interacted with on stage, that gave them so much more life. That, I
Mhm.
mean, they were manipulated beautifully, but her relationship with each of the puppet characters just brought it all to life. Talk to me a little bit about directing that project and how it came about.
Um, Well, of course, Marty Robinson's a very good friend. Annie Evans is a very, very good friend. And Annie had written this script during COVID. And she kept saying to me, I think I want you to direct this script. And I go, yeah, okay, well, 'cause it was COVID and we're all like, what? We don't even know if we're ever going to have a show again. Um, and then sure enough, we started to put it together. I read it and it was such a great script. And I could visualize how we could do certain things. And then Marty and I had a few conversations and he said, I think I'm going to do them all out of rattan. And I said, are we going to cover them? Are we not going to? So we went through all the design questions and Marty's a brilliant designer, of course. And so he put it together as he saw fit. And suddenly we had these great elephants. And then we went through a casting process. Jamaica had started to work on Sesame Street. And so had Tori, who plays the Mrs. Matumbe, the kind of mother character, and Bradley had come along too. He plays a father. And so we knew we had those three core performers when we had worked with them and talked about doing it. And so we did a little trial show. Yeah, there's Jamaica. We did a little video to see how it would work together, and Jamaica was in that one, and it was great. And I actually performed in that original trial. We weren't sure what we were going to do or how we were going to do it. And then as Annie continued to refine the script, we realized what we could have. We could see that this would work with Jamaica doing the XYZ. And we had all kinds of other ideas. Like I wanted to make it real. I was thinking, we'll do projections of the African Sveld and all this. And then when we did it, there's this place called the Ridgefield Play Barn. It's literally a barn that's been converted into a theater. And we put it together. Of course, we did it on a shoestring. The cast stayed in my house and Marty and Annie's house. We brought everybody in because it's right up the road. The barn was right up the road from our houses. And we spent a week putting the show together, and it was, lightning in a bottle for us. It was just, Jamaica was perfect in this role. All our puppeteers were fantastically able to sell themselves as elephants made out of fantasy rattan, as far as I'm concerned. That, it's a visual, it's a memory of what what Annika has experienced. So I love the fact that the puppets themselves are almost a memory of what an elephant is. It repeats the leitmotif, as it were, of what we're trying to sell there in the show. And it really was Annie's experience and drawing on what Annie had learned she had spent time on in an African, helping to, I forgot the name of the organization she worked with, but they were like doing surveys on elephants and working, and she was there for 6 weeks in Kenya, working with elephants and helping to save their environs. So she had this real love of elephants and lots and lots of information about them. So it was a very lucky, wonderful thing for all of us to come together and do that. And we're very fond of each other and fond of the show. And I think
did the script evolve, or was the script set and then, or like was it in process still when you were doing the? It was
pretty complete when we started, and then we just refined pieces of it as we went. Annie had pretty much written, and she's a very good writer and has written shows for many years for Sesame Street, so it was pretty complete. It was fairly complete, and then we refined all the different parts of it that we needed to, and particularly with making the puppets work, and then we just moved it along together. And then the acting came through. Bradley does a wonderful job. And, in terms of, as with all puppet shows, how do we make this show work with 6 puppeteers? Can we do it? Oh, wait, we need 7. No, there aren't enough elephants. We'll need 8. I don't think we ever went exactly to 8. Maybe we did. But it was,
and they're not small puppets either. I mean, for goodness sake,
gotta be big.
Yeah. Should we take a look at the clip? Let's take a look at the little promo that you did for the center, and Connie, let's go ahead and run that. Let me see if I can move it into the right position. There we go. and hopefully we'll be able to hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think we can hear it.
Oh no.
Connie's going to work on that now, but look at that's just beautiful movement. So this really makes sense to me, because when I saw the production, seeing the actual ears and the actual trunk, and then going from that to the rattan was worked really well, because you were going from something more practical to something more of a memory too.
Right.
On the human, that's just beautiful.
Yeah. That's a baby elephant. We actually, that little baby cloth elephant was originally in, and then we went to all rattan and just have her come in the beginning with the other cloth covered pieces. That's a design choice right now that we're
so you're taking out the elephant, the baby elephant, and just keeping the rattan version of the baby elephant in?
Yeah.
Oh,
The baby
fantastic.
elephant comes in the beginning after the ears are all, the ears and the trunk and the covered stuff. The stuff that looks like a real elephant, the baby comes out and visits with her for a second and then disappears, because we just can't give her up. She's too darn cute.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense in terms of, this for me, setting the stage that this is her real life right now, and then she's remembering. This is all memory. Once we go back into rattan, it all becomes about her memory of what happened, how she lost her family and gained her family back,
Yeah.
And the story for me is just so strongly touching of what you can do, of resilience, of what happens when bad things happen, how you turn them around, how you create a whole life out of something that should have been the worst thing ever. But somehow you pull yourself through and create a whole new universe to live in. And that's what she did,
And it's a perfect application of puppetry as well, because it's with puppets, and an audience can attach so much easier to a puppet, I think, than obviously you wouldn't have live elephants on stage performing this, but like you can characterize and have them be so effective, and that, like, I felt completely connected, and when they were threatened, or when they were, it was very it was very engaging in that way for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a long time. I always tear up at the end, or not so much anymore now that I've seen it about 1,000 times, but
still scribbling notes and back.
Yes, I'm still taking notes. But literally, the first 8, 10, 12 times I saw the whole show, I would still get a tear in my eye, because it is, to me, very moving that it somehow touches you. And I don't know what that secret is, but it does. There's something about
you know it when you see it, though, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
So directing or performing, do you have a preference?
Oh, that's a hard one. Yeah, no, I'm pretty split on them. I will always love performing. It's just second nature. It just is so much fun, and but directing is using your brain in a different way, and it's more like working at the O'Neill. There's a give back, there's a give and take there. It's nice, it's lovely, as you do both too. It's so lovely to perform, and it's just a different energy and a different buzz it gives you. But directing is sort of a more long-term feeling of accomplishment and movement.
And you're really being of service to the people that you're directing, because you're the audience's eye, and you are, like, if I'm of service to the actors that are on stage, or the performers on stage, I know I'm doing my job, because I'm supposed to be the eye, and that's they need that as performers. But it's not as I enjoy it, and it's fun, but man, put a puppet on my hand and I'm that's probably, if I had to choose between the two.
Yeah, sometimes I'm pretty equally split at the moment. That's because I'm doing a lot of directing stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't, like, I've been doing a new character, Nani Bird, on Sesame Street, who's a Hawaiian character. Who's based on kind of on my mom and kind of on my aunties, and she's Big Bird's caretaker from when he was a baby, and there's something about this puppet is big and heavy and very difficult to work, but I don't care. I love doing it so much. I just love her so much that I don't care that my art is killing me at the end of the day.
Yeah. If you have any questions for Pam, please feel free. If you're on Facebook with us or if you're on YouTube with us, just type it in the chat. We'd love to have your questions as well. Pam, besides Annika's Elephants, which I know you tell me about where that's going. I know you've got
Oh,
an
yeah.
exciting thing going there. What's happening with that?
Yes. From March 27th to April 7th, we will be at the New Victory Theater in New York City. So it's very, very exciting to be doing that. And I think the middle of the week is school shows, but the weekends will be public shows, and it's just really exciting to be that close to Broadway, to be
That is
Broadway bound.
so fun. That's very exciting.
Yeah,
Do you know how long your run is going to be, or?
right now it's just the 2 weeks, 2 weekends. Yeah. So, and then we'll move on from there. I think there's possibly they have an open week after that we may stay on, but New Victory is pretty clean about who they have for how long and how they move it through.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
that,
very exciting though, to
yeah,
get a chance to have it go and be
yeah,
in New York for a little while. That's terrific.
yeah, and then we hope to tour it. We have a lot of a number of different, actually, colleges and universities are very interested to show it. So part of that show for us, we have a real driving force to we want to get it to inner city kids. We want to get it to children of color, to see themselves on stage, to see that they can be a part of puppetry. We're trying, in my constant effort to diversify, have puppetry in who we have involved in puppetry, and the wonderful huge amount of ethnic puppetry there is in the world. Bring those people in is my thing. So that's one of the goals of Anika's Elephants, is to reach especially underserved audiences, and then also just to reach out to people, to let them know that elephants still are incredibly threatened, that they're the environments that they've lived in are disappearing. There still are poachers. They're still literally, killing elephants just to get their tusks, and it's just crazy. So the twofold in that show is also very important to me.
That's
So
terrific. I hope it has a real nice long tour. That sounds like it would be incredible.
yeah.
What else are you working on?
Oh, at this point, it's mostly putting the O'Neill together for
You don't do that a week before? Is that not?
used to be. No. I start as soon as the O'Neill goes down. I'm starting up again this year. Andrew Kim from Thingamajig Theater will be coming in, and they're going to be at the O'Neill. They're going to be doing huge lantern puppets, and
Their big
Andrew,
puppets are beautiful too. My goodness.
and he came with Tom Lee, not last year, the year before, and he saw the property and what we can do on that beautiful piece of property. And his vision is to have these giant self-lit puppets moving down that beautiful lawn towards the ocean to work in that arena, which is going to be fantastic. And then we have a Tarumba Theater out of Lisbon, Portugal, coming in, and that's Luis Vieira and Ruth Rubio, and they will be coming in, and they will be working on all kinds of artistic forms and object theater, and just they're fantastic, wonderful, wild and woolly puppeteers, just the most fun that I've been the privilege to hang out with for been quite a in the last few years. Our pre-conference, Alice Gottschalk is coming back, and she's doing again the robotics and marionettes. Last year she started it. They 3D printed parts and made little robots that could work, and then she combines them with a marionette so that you can have a marionette that you pull and the wings will still work, and you don't have to be busily pulling a string to make those.
Like Stephen Motram did a bunch of yeah, he's a brilliant marionettist, and he did a bunch of things like this. This was like back in '96 when I saw him perform in England. Yeah, and it's such a cool way to have a marionette have something automated while you're also manipulating it. That's really neat.
Right. So she's been working on that, and she also teaches the Arduino programming, so it goes with the computer programming, and you can choose to use it and slow it down or not. I mean, it's fascinating. I just would stop in. It was way over my head, but they did a great thing. They made I think they made 4 puppets there within the course of that pre-conference week. I think they'll be cutting it down a little. People were a little overwhelmed, I suspect. So Alice is coming and doing that, and Jim Krupa's back doing, of course, his wonderful Met class.
Oh, yay!
You can't beat that Met class. And Liz Hara is a writer from Sesame Street, and she taught writing last year, and it was such a big hit that we're having her back again to teach writing for the Puppet Theater, because for me, the script is everything. We've got to get those stories told in a nice, concise way so that the audience knows what we're trying to tell them.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
a problem. So,
and when you're a puppeteer and you're being jack of all trades, where you're doing your own design and building, and like that can easily fall by the wayside.
Yeah, I think that we all fall victim to that because, we're puppeteers. We're control freaks. We like to control things. That's what we do. We control everything.
Yeah.
And so what you have to do is figure out what are the things you're really good at controlling, and then let someone else help you with those things that you're not so good at controlling.
Yeah.
And pay attention to, like the script. I mean, I think that's always, we tend to fall in love with whatever we've built and the special thing it can do. And then we kind of forget that it's more
5 minutes later, that's over.
It's over.
Yeah.
It's a one-trick pony. We got to figure out how to move that baby forward,
Yeah.
So, so it's very fun to have her, Liz, coming in to teach.
Nice. And is Kurt Hunter coming back to do marionettes?
Coming back to do marionettes again. And
nice.
We have a new music composition teacher, Will Wright's coming in to teach music. He's been composing. He started at the O'Neill as one of our student participant composers. And then he started just writing a lot of stuff for different puppeteers, and he's just become a really fantastic composer for puppets.
That's such a great resource to have too. I tell you, to have that. There was a few musicians when I was there as well, and they would just come in and play guitar or just do a little rhythm or something, and it just adds that little extra level of complexity. That's really nice.
Yeah, and we want puppeteers to know that you can do that, because that's not a gift you get very often, right? We want you to, if you're going to work with a musician, how do you work with a musician? When should they come in? And they should come in right from the beginning, which was something I didn't realize either.
Yeah.
They can help you with the trajectory of the show, where it's going and how it's going to move forward. So it
can really reveal pacing too. It's like you get to hear your pacing through the music as well, and adjust accordingly too, which is neat. Yeah.
So it's a good lineup. And Richard, and I hope Nefri is going to be back to do emerging artists again this year. That was quite wonderful. So it's a good lineup. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone at the moment. I didn't write it down. That's silly me. But it's a really nice lineup. With the applications open January 15th, mid-January. So we'll be doing a big announce coming up. This is kind of a sneak announce. So
that sounds great. Well, if you're out there and you can take advantage of the O'Neill experience, I highly recommend it. Pam, it's been just so lovely getting the chance to talk with you. I'm thrilled to hear about your trajectory, and I'm so grateful that that you're giving back in the ways that you do. You are raising all boats of puppetry, and I really appreciate that. So thanks for spending a few minutes and talking with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm flattered to talk about these wonderful people. I'm joyful so they don't be forgotten, right? When we say
absolutely
things,
Yeah.
And I didn't say Nikki Tilrow was the other one I wanted to mention.
Oh yeah, tell me. Go. All right, leave if you need to. If you need to, Pam and I are going to talk a little bit about Nikki.
Nikki was at the O'Neill with us, and
really?
She became one of our teachers. And Nikki, I met in Toronto, and then I invited her to come and teach. I got her to teach for University of Hawaii. I talked the head of the department to bring her in. And then that's Kermit and Nikki met through what we were going on. And they worked together for a long time. And she was taken from us way too young. So I just meant to mention her too. I knew there was someone. I was going, there's one more person, there's one more. So
I was trying to remember. I know I think I was talking to Debbie Lutzke Allen, and were you guys at university at the same time in Hawaii? That's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And she studied with Nikki too. We brought Nikki to come in, and what Nikki did, she analyzed movement like nobody else. She could
Mm.
break down a movement, and especially she was super great at the is it maybe I don't know, it's the hand puppet style that has a like, it's this guy,
Yeah.
but they have giant heads. There's Nikki. They have really giant, large, oversized heads, and it's a specific style that she trained in, I think, in Prague.
Hmm.
And but her breakdown of that kind of hand puppet movement was like nobody else's. It's
Really?
just beautiful. Yeah, she was a beautiful, beautiful puppeteer, and she did television puppetry too in Toronto
Yeah.
for a while, and she had her own theater for a long time. But her ability to teach movement was fantastic.
Neat.
Yeah,
Neat.
yeah, she was very good. So
Nice. Lovely. All right. Well, Pam, lovely talking with you. Thank you all for joining us. Come back next month when we have Adam Krutinger as our guest. And thanks
he's
again for
great.
joining us. We will see you next time. Goodbye,
Thank you.
everyone.